I'm Sharon Brett Kelly, and today on The Detail, I'm on the shores of Lake Rotoiti, and I'm just about to go and see film producer Piripi Curtis and talk to him about his new film, Whawhai Tonu. This is the film that's being released this Matariki weekend. It's a film that's 8 years in the making, and that was rejected a number of times for funding by the New Zealand Film Commission. So I'm here to talk to Piripi about that. At a time when money is really tight and there's talk of a merger between our two big funding agencies, the New Zealand Film Commission and NZ On Air.
Tāku e whai nei ko te oranga tonutanga o tōku.
Set in 1864, Whawhai Tonu, or Struggle Without End, is about the pivotal battle of Ōrākau in the first New Zealand land wars in Waikato. It tells the story from the Māori perspective in Te Reo, through the eyes of two young teenagers caught up in the chaos of the battle.
This is our family home.
Yeah, well, I'm with Piripi to find out how they got this groundbreaking film to air on a tiny budget. First of all, can we start just by talking about the film itself and the background to it? And your role is what? You're the producer?
Yes, I'm the lead producer, yeah. So Mike Jonathan is the director, and he is from that battle. So his great-great-great-grandmother, Ngāhoka, and his great-great-grandfather, they were both in the battle. So it was always in the back of his mind that he'd love to tell that story. And we've been part of a wider rotorua whānau of an industry. So I said, yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I did was got Tim Worrell, our writer. We had a wānanga over in Ohope.
Oh.
And I also flew over my mate, Toby Parkinson, who's an experienced producer. And the four of us spent the weekend jamming the story and what we'd like it to be. Once we had the script, we went to the Film Commission. And the good thing about the Film Commission is they have a wonderful development. And so we were able to develop the script and dive deeper into it. I ended up spending my whole COVID lockdown writing this proposal. And I missed the joy of being at home watching Netflix.
Still, what a great way to use your lockdown time.
Well, we got declined.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, about 4 or 5 times.
Did you?
Yeah.
By the Film Commission or other funders?
Film Commission.
4 or 5 times?
Yeah, something like that. I can't remember exactly. Maybe.
Why?
Yeah. At times we weren't ready. Of course, it's a competitive round. Every time we got declined, they would give us more support to keep developing it.
So they believed in it, but they just felt like it needed more work?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things was convincing them that the 3 of us who were first-time feature filmmakers could pull this off, because they have trust issues. Well, they need to know that you're not going to take the money and throw it away.
Let's talk about the budget.
Mm-hmm.
How much were you seeking from the Film Commission, firstly?
Well, for a normal feature film, they cap it at $2 million. For the He Pounamu Te Reo Māori Feature Film Initiative, it's capped at $2.5 million. So they put this feature film initiative out. So we have to find the rest.
Had you worked out what you needed?
So we found $7.6 million to make the film. The Film Commission had said to us the whole time, you really need $15 million. And we said, well, this is all we got, but we reckon we can still do it anyway. So we did. But saying that, the Film Commission were right. We could have done with so much more money.
So $2.5 million from the Film Commission.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you get the other $5 million from?
The rebate is a biggie. That 40%. We couldn't have made this film without the rebate. We also had our funding agencies, Te Māngai Pāho, who gave $300,000. NZ On Air, they gave $251,000 in the end. We had Te Pūtake o Te Riri give us $200,000 towards the film, and education resource that we've produced for it.
Explain what Te Pūtake.
Te Pūtake o Te Riri is an initiative that TPK runs that is about commemorating the New Zealand land wars. And so a fund was created to help those who want to acknowledge those past battles, really.
And when you say the rebate was really important, can you explain about that? That's getting overseas funding, is it? Or
No. In New Zealand, for a New Zealand feature film, over a certain, so many million, I can't remember exactly right now, as a producer, I'm allowed to claim 40% of my budget. So that, it turns 2.5 million into almost 3.5, 4, and then we add on all these other funders, and I have private investors. So they were friends and family, and they put their own money in, along with some grants that I got and sponsorship that we got. We tried every avenue we've done, so we've been out there and gone to a lot of places.
Difficult? Is that difficult, going out
Very,
there?
because this is a new genre. It's the first feature film that tells of our history from a Māori perspective in Te Reo Māori. And so everybody's going, sounds good, but am I going to get my money back? No, it's too risky. So it's a risk profile, really.
Yeah.
And so we had to find other people who would just who were giving money to us, to Mike, the director, to myself as a producer, who backed us to do it, as opposed to the project is a great one to get money returned, because there's no model for it. So I guess my message to all those who came to the premiere, which is over 1,200, and then the Descendant screening and all the other screenings I was having, is that we're asking them to make sure that at least two people, they get two people to go to see the pictures and pay for the tickets. And even if they have to go again, they need to go again. Because if we make this a box office success, especially in the first weekend, a Matariki weekend, we get to change the funding landscape for our films, because no one's funding our films. And so if we can prove that this is a sound financial investment, we'll be able to see more of our own stories, which is really crucial.
All that is left us is to strive to recreate order by darkness and mayhem.
What if we are the mayhem? The darkness?
A lot hangs on the box office success of the film at a time when fewer people are going to the cinema, and local content makers are all in an epic battle for money and screen time. So would a merger between the Film Commission and NZ On Air deal with these issues? Spin-off founder Duncan Grieve explains how it could work.
There are different mandates to the Film Commission and New Zealand On Air. The Film Commission is about fostering New Zealand films. It funds them directly, but is also tasked with trying to bring investment in and to bring productions to New Zealand. New Zealand On Air is largely about television, or about sort of episodic shows, but it is explicitly about New Zealand audiences. It could fund a show that becomes a massive hit overseas, but if it doesn't do well locally, it will have failed on some level. For the Film Commission, a film that performs very poorly in New Zealand but is a hit in some other territory can still be considered a success, and that's one kind of crucial distinction.
What is wrong with this model?
Yeah, I think that they are constrained by legislation that was written in the sort of 70s, 80s, 90s, and absolutely doesn't recognise the internet. The biggest thing really, and this is on some level the argument for merging them, is that for audiences now, they don't really think about film and TV as separate things, and they don't really think about New Zealand platforms and overseas platforms. The biggest platforms are YouTube and Netflix, and the biggest content can sit on Netflix or TVNZ Plus or whatever else. And so those distinctions, which were once really important and spoke to the way that things were funded, where the content was consumed, how it was financed, that's all sort of dissolved into one pot. And the agencies are set up, designed around how things used to be, and that makes dealing with the now and certainly with what's coming really difficult.
So a merger, what would that look like? A lot of people talk about Screen Australia. Would it be along those lines?
There are a few different ways you can do it, and there are going to be arguments about what you sort of rule in or rule out. One of the hard things about this is it is very difficult to say here is the line, because Netflix is increasingly commissioning games, for example. So should they be part of it? But let's assume you do the simpler, more basic version, at least to begin with. You would put television and film in the same bucket because they're on the same platforms, going to the same audiences, and increasingly cinema is, it's not the dominant show. So the theory goes that if the finances are largely the same, the platforms are largely the same, and audiences don't really see the difference, then why would you continue to have separate agencies and force producers who often work across film and television themselves, that's been the case for a long time, to kind of have to hold two sets of relationships and to kind of deal with two quite different mandates from the two organisations?
It would cut down the admin, hopefully, wouldn't it? And that's been, I think, some of the criticism has been about how many people work at both of these agencies and how much money is actually spent on kind of keeping them going.
Yeah, I think that the film and television and screen production more broadly, it's a restive industry. It particularly as it pertains to the Film Commission, I don't recall a time when everyone was broadly happy with how things were going. There's often, irrespective of who's in charge and which way the wind blows, there's always a lot of grumbling radiates out of them, rightly or wrongly. But this idea of merging the two organisations, seems to have a lot more support than is typical for any kind of contested notion within screen production. That's why I think it probably will happen.
Obviously, there is some urgency to this because the industry is in crisis in a lot of ways, isn't it? It's hurting really badly.
Oh, yeah. The media industry, because it has such huge exposure to advertising, which is notoriously the first elastic budget line that is cut when there's belt tightening going on, it's going through probably the most significant downturn that I can recall. And what makes it more difficult again is the fact that it's not happening in a stable environment. The GFC, there were still big audiences and the internet had yet to erode them. There's been long-term structural audience decline going on for at least 10 years now. Linear TV audiences are going down year on year by very significant margins, and that's because they're going to digital environments, but when they go there, they don't just start watching TVNZ shows for 4 hours a night like they used to. They often watch YouTube or Netflix or Amazon Prime. And likewise with movie theatres, they're going to the movies when you've got a 65-inch high-def TV at home which can show you anything you want versus what can often be quite a limited selection of movies. And there's been a superhero glut and a whole bunch of other things going on. Like, it's just, there are whole audiences which don't often have a good reason to go to the movies anymore. So you sort of package those things up and you go, unless there is something kind of relatively big done relatively quickly, you're going to see you don't have as many shows being made, and therefore there's less reason to keep tuning in. Therefore, you're more likely to move away from looking at places which have a lot of New Zealand content. Therefore, there's it's just very cyclical and feeds on itself, and the flywheel is operating in reverse right now, and it's a pretty scary time.
Here and now, I will hunt them down to the ends of this earth.
If you had 15 million instead of 7.5, what difference would that have made?
Oh, massive. We had planned all these one-shots. We call them, oneers, where you'll go through and spend 4 or 5 minutes just one shot following the action. We did it so many times. Not a single one made it into the film in its entirety. Because as soon as you point the camera one direction, there's nobody there in the background. Busted. And that's because we didn't have the extras. That's because we didn't have the money to do, and we could have really drilled in on certain aspects of the action of it and the scale of it. I mean, I think we did a great job. It's an epic in nature, and yet it was not epic in any sense when we were on set.
Sounds like the typical New Zealand story, really, of filmmaking or any kind of media.
Yeah, we're just lucky that we had so many passionate people. Like all our extras that did turn up, they came from miles around. We had an extra. He is a medical doctor and a bone specialist, but he came to play his ancestor. Now, his ancestor's not in the script, but he came anyway. A lot of them came from Raukawa, Maniapoto and Tūhoe to represent their ancestor in the background, which is just wonderful. When you're doing this on the smell of an oily rag, no one gets paid properly in my mind. I think they're so valuable. I'd love to have paid them 3-4 times what they did. At a Hollywood level, imagine that.
There's a lot of talk about the New Zealand Film Commission merging with NZ On Air and creating kind of a one-stop shop, a single agency for funding for screen. Do you think that could be a way of, I guess, dealing with some of these issues that are around, in terms of, well, finding the money, but also the whole admin side of things, the marketing?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's like I understand the pros of combining to create greater efficiencies, but they're two different worlds. Whether you like what the Film Commission does or doesn't do, they are still doing the marketing. We do need the marketing. We do need the development, because in the New Zealand On Air have developed a new Rautaki strategy, and finally we're seeing them committing to development, which I really applaud. So there are benefits, but if we go by the rebate debacle where the government delayed looking at the rebate and took so long, they created so much uncertainty that a lot of our big studios were empty for so long because no one was prepared to come in an environment where it was uncertain. And so when you merge two entities, there's going to be a period of uncertainty, and of course I think the resources will get tied up in a merger as opposed to the content. And I just worry. At this point in time, the Film Commission has just gone through a restructuring right now, and I think this is the wrong time to even consider that. Everybody's hurting with the money that's being sucked up by the government. So my thing would be, let's wait and see.
There's kind of a sentiment out there as why do we need a film in Te Reo Māori, a historical film that brings up all these issues of colonialism. Have you come across that?
Saw some comments on LinkedIn. So there are the rednecks out there, but there's also the ignorance. You see, our historical amnesia in this country is no accident. It's been absolutely deliberate, because when decent Kiwis realise how atrocious, how disgusting the New Zealand land wars and what they were really about, everybody be really upset. So yes, it's going to upset, but until you actually know, all you're going to say is, oh, come on, Māori, how long do we have to listen to this? Let it go already. But if you don't know how bad it was, then you're going to think people can let it go because you have. But when you know how bad and how unfair and unjust the whole land wars was, you wouldn't say those things. You'd actually be going, how can we work together? And you'd also say, how patient have Māori been to still want to work together. We still want the treaty honoured, and despite this despicable, dark, bloody past of ours, we still want to work together. And so for me, this film is about healing. It's a first step in healing, but we can't heal unless people know what happened. And until you know what happened, everybody's going to just pretend it didn't happen, but yet Māori are still feeling the impacts. And for Indigenous cultures, and for Māori especially, but Indigenous cultures across the world, time is irrelevant in terms of when the hurt was. So it was 160 years ago. People go, oh, get over it. But that's not how we work. It's as if it happened yesterday. And our people have passed this on because our culture has the past come with us into the present. We walk with our past. Our past is with us right now. And it's a concept that most Western people can't understand because it's opposed to the way in which Western culture thinks about things. You know, and our actions of today are based on being informed from the past, but for our future. It's not a linear timeline. It's all happening now.
Before we go, one more thing. During his research for the film and interviews with experts and iwi leaders, Piripi came across details about the role that BNZ's founders, in particular Thomas Russell, played in the Waikato Wars. So he went to BNZ to ask for funding.
I went to the BNZ Bank to say, hey, how about you help us with our publicity as a way to front foot your role in the New Zealand Land Wars, because people are still hurting from it. And so I got as far as the third tier, but he couldn't get past his own boss, who was in the second tier, and then of course there's the top tier boss. So I guess I really wanted to say how miserable the Bank in New Zealand has been in responding to their own history of devastation and blood, and they couldn't even front up with some cash. The point is, our past is not reconciled yet. And this film, to me, is our first step in our nation to healing. Because when people, we all go realise, wow, we need to face it. Now how do we own it? And even though the BNZ Bank is owned by Australians, they bought it. They bought it with massive profits. It's been serving them well because we know they've got billions in profits every year. And they could stump up $1. Disappointing, at the very least, that our history is so easy to ignore.
BNZ says every year it receives numerous requests for funds or sponsorship for various commercial and philanthropic projects, and it is unable to support them all. That's all for today. The Detail is a newsroom production funded by NZ On Air and RNZ. Thanks to Piripi Curtis and Duncan Grieve. This podcast was engineered by Jeremy Ansell and produced by Gwen McClure. I'm Sharon Brett Kelly. Mā te wā.